Good evening, everybody. It is 6:06 p.m. on the 21st of April. It's the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I'm Mike Capuano. I am the chair of the Planning Board. With me tonight is the Vice Chair, Amelia Abor, the clerk, Erin Gino, and our members, Russell Pildes, Jahan Habib, and Debbie Howard Easton. Our little disclosure is that I forgot to read last week, I'm sorry. Pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting of the Somerville Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of the agenda. This meeting is being recorded. We have a number of items on our agenda that are a discussion of a joint hearing that we had with the Land Use Committee a few weeks ago. One discussion is Valdo Manessa Sr. requesting the adoption of amendment to the zoning ordinance map to change the zoning district of 6 Prospect Street from UR to MR. We'll also be discussing proposing a zoning map amendment to change the zoning district of the contiguous parcels containing 250 to 256 Somerville Avenue and 527 Allen Street, odd side only, from urban residents to neighborhood residents, and changing the zoning district of 29 to 31, 33 to 35, and 37 to 39 Allen Streets from urban residents to commercial business. There was another proposed amendment that was on Powder House Living LLC. It is my understanding that that proposed amendment has been withdrawn, so we will not be discussing that this evening. And I was asked to remind everybody that 350 Assembly Row, is that the right address, Raisa?
This is Raisa speaking. 350 Assembly Row is the correct address.
Yes. 350 Assembly Row has been re-advertised for our May 5th meeting and will not be coming up today. So if there is anybody here who has an interest in that will be brought up in a few weeks. So I have some unfortunate news for our membership. I will let Russell share his news.
Thank you, Chair. It's with quite a bit of bittersweetness that I resign from the planning board here in Somerville. This will be my last meeting. It was certainly not my intention when I moved here 6 years ago and became more involved in the community. I made all those little mental commitments to Somerville and to staying, and yet my career is taking me elsewhere to Washington, D.C. So it's not for lack of trying. I want to thank everyone here who attends these meetings regularly. We appreciate that. I'm grateful to the board, my fellow board members, and to the chair for their dedication to the discussion that we have and to our city. I also want to thank the city staff, especially but not limited to the planning staff. I think you all have a harder job than we do by a long shot. I appreciate everybody's collegiality and their trust and the trust of the community for being here, and I wish you all the best.
Russell, thank you, and you will be missed. And thank you for all of your contributions. I always find your expertise is definitely helpful in the way that I look at applications and discussions by the board. It has also come to our attention that Rob Buchanan earlier this week also resigned from the planning board, so we are down to the core four. Five. Doesn't rhyme as well. It's too bad. So we will make sure that we have a quorum as often as we can. That has not generally been an issue, but we just need to be a little bit more cognizant of that going forward. We do have Dan Botman with us tonight for a little bit, because I think you've got the land use committee later. Is that right, Dan?
That is correct. And whatever we can do to try and end up being there at like 6:30, that would be appreciated.
I think that's likely. what I'd like to do then is bring up discussion on the Prospect Street application to change the zoning from UR to MR5. We had a presentation by the applicant. We had some testimony taken on that at the Land Use Committee. And what I'd appreciate is staff's, sometimes what you'll do, Dan, as you know, is provide the planning board with kind of staff's assessment of the application and a potential recommendation following our discussion. So if we could move that one kind of to the top of the list, I would appreciate that.
Sure. I'm assuming you want me to just go?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, 86 Prospect's an interesting case for us to look into. The boundary between zoning districts sometimes does fall on across property that is owned by the same person, and that's what the case is here. I would say the southern end of the block is zoned the UR district, with the northern portion closer to Union Square zoned in the MR5 zoning district. The portion that is in, those are two separate lots. So when the division between those two districts was made, we don't always look at property ownership. It's not one of the primary things that drives the decision-making behind zoning district mapping. Sometimes it's taken into consideration, but others not. I don't think that if this were to be recommended for approval, that it would undermine planning objectives that are reflected in the current zoning map. It wouldn't somehow drastically change them, in our opinion, because it's 30 feet of additional lot width. That being said, it is not supported, in our opinion, from the public feedback, and we feel like there is a possibility to build a building using the split zoning districts that the public finds more acceptable and still falls in line with the planning goals for that area. If the zoning district is maintained as it is today, it's not like a building has to happen on either side, a UR building and then a separate MR5 building. If you dissolve the lot line between those two properties, effectively the only thing that plays out is the setbacks are different along the outer edges, because setbacks are reflective of where the lot lines are, not where a zoning district boundary is, except for their dimensions change. So we had a project on Somerville Ave that was like this, where the back half of the lot was in a different zoning district. You don't have to have a setback from that zoning district boundary on your own lot, for example. So the side setback that is normally required if these two lots are maintained as two separate lots, there is a side setback in the UR zoning district. That would have to be reflected by any kind of new development that would happen, as long as that lot line is still there. But since the property is owned by the same property owner, any kind of development could also get rid of that lot line and then put a building across both lots. In that case, another oddity that would still exist is that a 5-story building is permitted on one side of that now joined property and a 4-story building on the other, which might look weird. But there could be still the rooftop. We heard reference to a rooftop, I think agriculture or green roof of some type up there that could still be built on top of the 4th-story side of this building. I think it would still meet all of our housing goals if, either direction, whether or not this was supported or not. And the planning division doesn't have any reservations about small commercial spaces. If you remember, these two lots are about 30 feet wide each, so we're only talking about a 60-foot wide parcel with a building built onto it. neighborhood commercial isn't a bad thing when it's the right, the right uses. Everybody loves having a corner store or restaurants embedded in their neighborhoods. So you can see how this is kind of a mixed bag. And when it comes to that, a lot of what we do is default to what is reflected in our planning, including the zoning maps that we had proposed previously, the first time around, and also public feedback when there's a split decision from a planning perspective. So I would recommend falling back onto the public feedback in that type of circumstance. But like I said, this could go either way, and I'm not sure that I consider a fifth floor, 430 feet of width, detrimental to the neighborhood, as some of the comments made, but it's generally not supported to change where their expectations were of a 5-story building coming to their neighborhood from where it is today. So I think that probably best summarizes our thoughts about the Prospect Street proposal.
Thanks, Dan. Before I open it up to members of the board to ask questions of Dan and discussion, I do see that Attorney Schultz has her hand raised. I believe she represents the applicant in this case. This is generally not a back and forth of public testimony, but because she, as I recall correctly, does represent this applicant, I would like to be able to recognize her if she'd like to speak for a moment.
This is Raisa speaking. Jennifer, you have been unmuted on your side.
Great. Thank you, Raisa, and thank you, Chairman Capuano, and thank you, Dan, for your summary. I just quickly did want to say, and yes, I do represent the property owner and applicant here, that there's one other oddity that I would add to what Dan has noted, in that this is not just a split zone between the lot. This is a split zone between UR that does not go through sort of a traditional public process. The concept of site plan review is not included in the UR districts. The applicant would go straight to ISD with their plans, presuming a zoning compliant project, which is the intent. Whereas with MR5, with that half of the double lot, it would be subject to site plan review. And so part of the thinking here in requesting an up zone was to make the entire lot subject to the public and community site plan review process, as opposed to seeking a down zone for the MR5 half of the double lot, in which case the entire lot would be subject to UR, which I describe as somewhat expedited zoning with a lesser process. So that was just the one thing that I wanted to add of sort of why the applicant chose. It wasn't just one more floor. It was that, if there's going to be an opportunity to work with the community, we believe that the MR5 up zone is the way to do that. So thank you for the opportunity to speak briefly.
Thank you very much, Attorney Schultz. I would like to open up this discussion to members of the board. So if anybody has any comments or thoughts or questions of either the staff, or since the applicant's attorney is here, of her as well. Let's see it. Yes, Amelia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I have a question for Mr. Bartman. So as Attorney Schultz just described, in the scenario where the zoning was remained split, but a building that spanned both parcels was being proposed, what would the review process be in terms of the site plan approval process in that scenario?
If a single building were proposed across both of those joint lots, your board would have purview over the portion in MR5, which makes review awkward because the UR district does not require that. We haven't yet had a building that's faced two different review processes, though. But The short answer is one side of of that property would require the full site plan approval process, and the other half would not.
So while we may not be able to condition or think about mitigation for the portion on the URO lot, the public engagement process in terms of community meetings and notice and outreach would effectively remain the same.
Yes, if any single building were built on the MR5 side, it would have all of that process, and any joint building that spans the boundary between districts would still have to do that process for the MR5 portion. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amelia, did you have anything else?
I'm happy to share my thoughts, but those are the main questions I had.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions or comments before yes, Erin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you, maybe another question to Mr. Bartman. And this is more thinking back to, when zoning and the sort of schisms, or not schisms, but those transitions between especially MR and UR, or higher and lower kind of districts happen. When you guys were originally coming up with the zoning, was there any thought around how to, kind of establish a gradient? My thought process here is, you've got MR5 on one side, UR on the other side, and really what, seems to be, what's the average between those? And was there a sort of a thought for an overlay where you could sort of average two zoning districts when they're right next to each other to maybe establish a gradient between districts?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did not consider any kind of functionality like that in your second half of your question. Really, the UR district is the gradient district that goes between our MR or commercial core districts and NR. So we don't look at this abutment as a non-contextual effort.
Yeah.
You actually will see that it related to the other item on the agenda tonight. Allen Street, the west side of Allen Street was zoned for UR to specifically provide some step down between a taller district and the NR district on those other streets. So in this circumstance, the entire rest of the block is zoned UR. The impact of that is any kind of houses that are in the district are thought to over time evolve into apartment buildings and some of the larger buildings that are part of the UR zoning district. So that there is a character change embedded in the UR zoning district when it's mapped over top of the remaining houses and triple deckers that are there, because those are permitted in the NR zoning district.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And thanks for the clarification. I think thinking about UR as the transition in that way and how those will kind of morph over time is really helpful for how I think about this one.
Thanks, Erin. Did you have anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Danny, Russell. Amelia, you said that you had some additional comments and thoughts that you wanted to share, and I would, if you wanted to share them now, you're more than welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following the community feedback that we received on this, I was thinking through I believe it came up that it might be possible to, I'm sorry, I forgot the expression, but effectively to condition the parcel so that it had to remain a residential development, because there was a lot of community concern about the parcel being flipped and being in fact developed for commercial use, even though the developer has stated that's not their intention here. There's no real way to guarantee that. And I just wanted to share and perhaps get clarification on, my understanding is that a household living use is only allowed by special permit in the MR5 district anyway, so I'm not sure how we could effectively recommend a zoning change that was conditioned on something that is only accessible by special permit at a later stage of design. So I just wanted to flag that I had thought through that and felt like that was not really a feasible path to the best of my knowledge.
Appreciate that. So, yeah, I'll just Yes, Russell. I just want to remind folks that Dan has to leave at 6:30. So this is the one that I really want to get his thoughts on. So that's why I went first.
I'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess I just agree with what Amelia was just saying, that the fact that this is a stepwise change means that I just am not sure that it will be such a sharp, visibly sharp or experientially sharp change on the spot, which makes me lean towards a recommendation. But the community's concern is the community's concern. They're afraid of it becoming a sharp change. I guess knowing that I'm leaving, but I would still think that some of this is on us as a board, and to be aware of the planning purpose that we were talking about earlier, that we really need housing. People need housing in this town. They need housing in this area. It's intended to transition, and it needs to have those things. It needs to be livable. And as much as we can set the tone, I think that's partly on us too, even if we can't come up with a legalistic condition like you were talking about, Amelia. It's still something we need to be aware of. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
So traditionally what this board has done, now admittedly, this is only a recommendation to the land use committee. So our vote tonight means, as much as what the land use committee wants to make of it. So my thoughts on this are about kind of split, like I think we all seem to be to some degree. Taking into account the neighborhood's concerns is certainly something that weighs on me. But I also see the benefit of kind of what Attorney Schultz had mentioned. It's something that I had thought of when this was originally proposed a few months ago during kind of the first round, and then it was withdrawn and brought back. Is that giving the entire site an MR5 designation would put the entire thing through a public process and review by the board, which gives us a little bit more of a say in making sure that what is developed is something that is in alignment with what the neighborhood expects. But also knowing that they're concerned that they have to go through that process at all, I see in what we've done when what I have done when I've had kind of those mixed feelings, because it's only a recommendation, is the way I look at it is neither a positive recommendation because I have concerns, and not a negative recommendation because I do see merit in it. What I've suggested that we do in the past, and we have, is do a kind of a neutral recommendation, a no recommendation with language directed to the land use committee as to why it's a neutral recommendation. So that's how I'm leaning, and I don't know if the board has a thought on a particular way to go. Yes, I see Jahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you captured my thoughts as well, because I am split between the two possibilities. I see merits in both arguments. However, I'm hesitant to make a recommendation one way or the other, or not make a recommendation, particularly since it is going to be going to the city council. So I definitely concur with your viewpoint.
Yes, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can maybe also summarize my thinking really quickly. Also split decision. I can see merit in having a unified review process. I think that would be beneficial for the community and everyone involved. On the sort of other side, there's community concern, which to me also kind of speaks to what was the outreach kind of leading up to this. And then also concerns about, okay, this developer has said we'll do an MR5, but it will have sort of increased setbacks, right? For that one side of the lot that's facing the UR district now that also comprises of NR houses. So allowing for that sort of gradual change over time. But that's a developer promise, and if the parcel changes, I don't I don't know how we could condition that to a zoning map amendment, right? Like this can be MR5, but it has extra special setbacks just for this one parcel based on what the developer kind of committed to in these initial outreaches. That to me just seems really weird and makes me kind of hesitant to be enthusiastic about it.
Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, I do not think I would feel comfortable voting even on a no recommendation, or I would not feel in favor of a no recommendation. I think we've heard really clearly from the community that there's concern about a commercial use on this parcel, and I do not think that any of the tools available to us during the site plan review process will enable us to force a change in use if a commercial building were proposed rather than a residential building at that step. I could be mistaken, and if staff wants to correct me, I welcome that. But of the many tools at our disposal, I do not think that requiring a different use is one of them, and that is the concern that was most salient to me and what the community had voiced.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Yes, Russell.
Just want to say out loud that I agree with what Amelia just said. That's my position as well.
Okay. You know, and I think I'm still split. So I do not intend right now to make a motion. I think the board is also split, and I really could vote either way on either a negative recommendation or a no recommendation. I get the sense from the board that there is more of an inclination to have a negative recommendation. So I will invite someone to move to make a negative recommendation, taking into account the comments that were made by the public and the comments that were made by the board this evening. We'll see where we go.
Mr. Chair, despite my agreement with the community feedback that more housing here would be welcome in this neighborhood, I think that my concerns about controlling the use and the change in use that would come with the proposed upzoning overwhelm that concern. So I move to make a recommendation to not approve upzoning to the council.
Okay. Do we have a second? A second from Aaron, I saw. Okay. All in favor of making a no recommendation and incorporating the comments from the public and of the board in that negative recommendation. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
John votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Russell votes aye.
Thank you all. The next item on our agenda is, we have two of them, the two sides of Allen Street. So I'd like to, I think maybe Dan has left, which I wasn't intending to ask staff any questions on this one. But to the extent that anybody has a question of staff, Raisa might be able to help, or Rebecca. Yes, Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Has the takings analysis been done of this? This downzoning seemed to be legally suspect to me, not really knowing necessarily anything, but it just didn't seem right that in that spot that could happen. And if we're going to consider it, we should know if we're considering something that's valid. Has that already been vetted? Maybe we can't answer this question. It was certainly a question that I had of whether we were even considering a valid proposal.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something that has gone through the law department.
This is Raisa speaking. I believe that we would have to consult with legal.
I would think so too, because, you know, until and unless we have a statement saying that this is or is not, you know, a takings concern, as it would be the opinion of the city's legal department. I'm certainly not going to speculate on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments? Because I certainly have some. I have not seen a zoning proposal made what seems to be in complete contravention of years and years and years of public input and a planning process. That has been met with as strong and unified opposition by the neighborhood as the items on Allen Street. I was honestly very surprised to hear a number of people from the neighborhood say that they weren't given notice of this proposal until shortly before the hearing. I don't know what outreach was done by the proponent of these changes. I know that there is going to be some discussion at, I think, the land use committee going on right now. About precisely why this was proposed, because I think there was confusion among the members of the public. There was confusion, I think, among members of, from what I could tell, the land use committee, and certainly among, by me as a member of this board. I know that the proponent is expected to give some explanation at some point, either tonight or maybe already has, and that will be discussion by and between members of the land use committee and the city council. That is not information that has been presented to the planning board, so it's not something that I can speculate as to what that discussion would look like. So my thought on these two proposed amendments based on the public testimony and the discussion by staff, and I cannot imagine why I would vote to recommend either of these. To me, it was just uniformly opposed by the neighborhood with minimal support. I think it goes against the entire planning process and expectations of that area, and why it was designed to be what it was. You know, going as far back to the original rezoning of Union Square in like 2010, it was always designed to be a transition period. So I, as one member, would make a negative recommendation. And if the land use committee and the city council hear testimony from the proponent or discussion from the proponent of these applications that would sway them differently, that's certainly up to them. But none of that discussion was before us. So I would not recommend either of these if we were to take a vote right now. I'd like to invite Rebecca Cooper to be unmuted and ask a question of the board, because I think she would like to.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is Rebecca Cooper, Senior Planner with OSPCD Planning and Zoning. I just wanted to note that to the members' questions about potential legality, we can certainly facilitate following up with the legal department. We would just need the board to give us a sort of explicit outline of the questions. I know there's general interest about the legality of the maneuver. We would just need the board to sort of define the topic that you'd like us to follow up on.
For the purpose of this meeting, I think this is the last meeting that we can have before our timing to make a recommendation expires. I think this is the last day. So even if we did ask for that, I think the committee and the council can move forward irrespective of our recommendation. But yes, as Russell first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I echo your earlier sentiment that the proposition here flies in the face of the planning purpose in this area. And so on that basis alone, I would make a negative recommendation. I would be in favor of such a thing, and can't imagine, nor can I imagine supporting something like this. That said, it's probably in the city's interest to assess procedural and spot zoning risk, and there are a whole number of potential issues with this, those being two of them, because it sounds like people on the block were not aware of this thing happening despite claims to the contrary, which would be a legal risk. So on those two issues alone, I think that that could give the legal department somewhere to go, and the city should do that due diligence anyway, because those risks are those are lawsuits waiting to happen if they are in fact risks. So anyway, to summarize, I would support a negative recommendation as well on the planning basis alone, noting the timeline that you mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Russell. I saw Amelia, I think, a second ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree completely with what you and Russell have voiced. From what I can gather from the public testimony Rees received, having received no presentation or narrative from the proponent, this proposal also feels like it came about in response to a specific development plan about which I know nothing. I have done no research. I have heard nothing. It is clearly not yet in front of the board, if it is even in a process that would come in front of the board. But in addition to my concerns about this going against the comprehensive nature of the planning process for Union Square, the opposition that's been voiced by the majority of the neighborhood, as we've received in public comment, the lack of process and publication about it, I'm also concerned that the fundamental motive of this may be for it to be somewhat vindictive or retaliatory, which I also think is probably legally questionable and feel like we could not in good conscience even consider seriously as a board. Like, zoning is not a tool to stop a project that people have decided after the fact they do not like. Zoning is a comprehensive planning tool. There are other regulatory steps on the staff side and with the city for addressing community concerns, whatever they may be that are out there. This is not the forum for that. It's my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, Aaron, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I would totally echo Amelia's concerns there, which, zoning is not here to, it's a planning process, right? The UR district makes sense for this neighborhood. It's a transition sort of area from high rise to the rest of, Union Square. Making that NR just doesn't make any sense from a planning perspective. It doesn't achieve our goals and everything that everyone else has said. There was one thing that came up during the public testimony, which is that MR5 or the commercial business parcel, whatever that one is, which appears to be bundled in for possibly a vet wanting to, like a veterinarian, to set up shop in that place. And it seemed odd to me that it was like, oh, we're gonna do all of this zoning from UR to NR, oh, and throw in this weird commercial space for a vet. And I was thinking at the time, like, why not just keep UR everywhere? And then if you really wanted a vet in that building, just put in a small business overlay. I feel like there are good planning tools here that would serve the community. And this whole one it feels odd. I would tend to also not support it. It feels vindictive and just not, it does not feel like a good move for the long-term planning purpose of the zoning map as we intend it.
Thank you. Jahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with the board's opinion. I was very much troubled by the as you mentioned before, near unanimous opposition from the community and also the notification process. I thought that the community involvement would have been key, and assessing the views of some of the neighbors, the adjacent property owners, and so forth should have been considered. Also, I think to Russell's original point, I am concerned about the legal considerations here that have been highlighted, and within the context of the time frame that we have, I would also not support this amendment. So I concur with everyone's.
Thanks, John. I don't know if you want to, do you have any comments, Debbie?
Yeah,
Virginia?
and apologies because my connection has been going in and out, but I've been hearing for the most part the comments here, and I am in agreement. Some of it may be dissatisfaction with how the overall zoning played out in this particular neighborhood and location, but it was very thoughtfully done and a lot of community input along the way to get to where we were in this particular zone and this particular transformational kind of area. So I was uncomfortable kind of with what's being the approach being taken now, and I do have the same legal concerns that I know Russell raised as well.
I think we're in a place where we should take a vote. I think we're all in agreement that this is neither of these proposed amendments should be recommended for approval for a whole host of reasons. I would like, just for me, I don't want to speculate on the motive behind these. There may be some things that I don't know, but I can only go based on what was presented to us. There is potentially something else going on that I don't know. There may also be legal concerns. I would defer to the law department to advise the council on those. But I think we should move to make negative recommendations on both of these. So what I'll do first, they should be two different votes. I'm going to say the first item, 250 to 256 Somerville Ave and 5 to 27 Allen Street. The chair moves to make a negative recommendation to the Land Use Committee, seconded by Amelia. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote to make a negative recommendation on that. The next one is 29 to 31, 33 to 35, and 37 to 39 Allen Street. The chair votes to make a negative recommendation to the Land Use Committee, seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Okay, thank you all. We have a unanimous vote to make a negative recommendation on that agenda item. There is no other business that is before the planning board tonight. So I want to thank everybody for your participation and your comments and thoughts on because particularly the first one we discussed, I think, merited kind of a lengthy discussion with staff and between each other, and I appreciate that. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add before we adjourn for the evening?
Good luck to Russell for his next step. Yes, you.
I will say, I will miss you, and we wish Russell and Rob luck in their next endeavors. And at 6:50 p.m. the chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Chair votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Aaron votes aye.
Debbie votes aye.
Also votes aye.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, very much. We will see most of you back on May 5th. Good night.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everybody. Take care.
Good luck, Russell.
Good luck, Russell. Take care.
Be well all. See you.
Best
Thanks.
luck, Russell.